Hey there, Fiber Junkies! Welcome back to the Color Cauldron. I'm Johanna, the owner and dyer behind Potion Yarns and host of this podcast. If you are a returning viewer, you probably noticed that we didn't have a video last weekend. Usually I try to release one every weekend, but every now and then I have a week where life just gets a little bit crazy and in the way and it interferes with the podcasting schedule. And last week was one of those weeks. So the last 2 weeks have been a little bit crazy around here for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was my uncle passed away very unexpectedly. The last couple weeks were a little bit of chaos and craziness, and in the midst of it, we just decided that a podcast was not a priority as much as our family time was and our health was, both mental and physical. So thank you guys for your patience on waiting for that, but this week we're going to jump right back into the podcast. We are going to do it with kind of a nice, easy little simple video today, though. We're just going to talk about some things that I've been working on and some things that I finished. I honestly haven't had any ambition to knit. I've heard of people talking about this before online. People talk about losing their knitting mojo or something, or just kind of feeling uninspired and not even wanting to pick up their knitting anymore. And I always thought that sounded so sad and like depressing and just, oh man, how could you ever feel like you were so bad that you didn't want to work on your stitching? Because I'm usually the kind of person where the worse I feel, the more I need to get alone in my room or my house and just lock the rest of the world out and focus on my knitting. And a lot of times my knitting is what helps calm me down when I feel angry or angsty or worried. It gives me something to focus on that's creative and constructive that I can do when I'm worried or when I'm stressed. When I'm feeling really sad or depressed, it helps me feel like there's still something of beauty in this world and I get to make it. So it's really very healing and very soothing in many instances. But I had heard of people going through really rough things where even their knitting or their crochet or their spinning or whatever couldn't even help with the grief or the worry or the anger or the depression or whatever it was that they were feeling, the negative emotions that they felt. And excuse me, I always thought that sounded really sad, but I couldn't really relate. And honestly, the last couple weeks were like a fog of negative emotions, some positive emotions too. It was actually kind of a roller coaster of like some really positive things happening with some really negative things happening and just all over the place. And so I got to this point where I couldn't really knit. And the only time that's ever happened to me before, it hasn't only lasted for like a day or something when I was like super sick and I'm like puking all day. So I'm like, yeah, the last thing I'm going to do is try to focus on my knitting. And this time it wasn't because of that, but just with all of the family drama and issues that we were going through. Drama is really the wrong word, more just like family changes and processing and healing that was going on. There was kind of this moment where I realized I hadn't picked up my knitting for about 5 days. And that's very unusual for me. Some of you guys are probably like, oh, that's nothing. I go for months without knitting and then I pick it up again. And that's totally fine. But I was the kind of person that I knit at least a row or two every day. Every now and then I'll have a day where I'm so busy I don't get to pick up my knitting. And that's unusual, but it always makes me a little fidgety the next day. And so I'm eager to get back to it. But this one went on for like 4 or 5 days. I hadn't done any, and a couple people had even suggested it. Like my husband would bring me my knitting bag and be like, you want to knit? I'm like, no, I don't. I would take it with me when we went out of town to like relatives' houses. I'd take my knitting with me, and they're used to me bringing my knitting along, and I'll sit there and knit while we're all sitting around the table talking or playing games or whatever, and it just sat in the car or on the floor all day, and I didn't pick it up. And, you know, I think people were like, are you okay? Is everything fine? And I'm like, I just didn't feel inspired. I kind of had lost the drive to create anything, and I was just so busy and so focused on more important things that it kind of felt frivolous and like I didn't want to do it. So I kind of haven't made a lot of progress. I was knitting like a mad woman before the last couple weeks happened. So I was making really rapid progress on a couple new projects that I talked about that I was going to cast on, or I had just started to cast on the podcast a few weeks ago. But then I kind of stopped and I haven't made a ton of progress yet. But we'll go ahead and show them to you anyways. I did pick it up again the other day, and I've noticed that I'm not knitting for as long anymore. Like I'll pick it up and I'll knit for a little while, but not for as long of a stretch in the evening anymore. It's shorter stretches, but I'm still doing it. And I think that, you know, if I gradually kind of work my way back in, maybe I'll never get back to the point where I was knitting all the time, and that's okay. But I think I probably will at some point. I think I'm just going through a dry spell right now. You know, there's seasons in life. There's seasons where you're super creative and prolific and you make everything, and then there's seasons where you're like, I can't remember how to cast on, and I don't remember why I ever wanted to learn to do this. So, yeah, I'm coming out of one of those seasons, I think, but I'm not in full swing yet. But let me show you the things that I have been working on. First off, the thing that I finished, I actually finished it about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and then I have not been home long enough to block it since then. So this still needs to be blocked, and I don't remember where I was the last time I showed it to you. I may have actually already showed this to you, but I still haven't blocked it. So if you missed it, this is the I Am Groot cardigan, or Groot's cardigan on Ravelry. I think she changed it to just Groot's cardigan. But it's this really beautiful worsted weight, like jacket, kind of sweater jacket thing. And I knit that with my bombshell worsted in the Opera Glasses colorway, which is just a really beautiful, like oyster beigey neutral color with like a tinge of pink, but it's really just a nice beige, kind of like champagne and beige. And one of my favorite things is that it has these fabulous pockets on the front. And they're kind of nice and low on the hem, so you know, you can stick your hands down, and they're just right at the hem. And this goes like down past my butt, so it's a coat, a cardigan coat with long sleeves, and then it has this fabulous cable panel up the back, and then it has 2 skinny little cable panels on either side of the shawl collar in front. Now I haven't blocked it yet, and I have not put buttons on yet, but other than that, it's all done. And my only thing is, I followed the pattern exactly for the collar, and my only frustration is the collar is really tiny. I was expecting a big long shawl collar that would like fold over and sit pretty far down on the back of your sweater, and that's as far down as my collar goes. So it's only about 1.5 inches deep, and I wish that I had made the collar larger and I had just gone off the pattern to do that. I don't know why they made it so small, because like the front button band, you do short rows on the button band that you pick up all the way around, and on the front button band at the bottom, it's fairly wide, like I like it, but the collar is really, really small to me. I tend to prefer a really big collar, like 3 inches or more usually, that folds over and just feels very voluminous and voluptuous and luxurious, and this one doesn't have a very big collar, so I'm disappointed about that. But it does fit really nicely, and I love this bombshell worsted for sweaters. It's my favorite like sweater coat or cardigan yarn to work with. I do love a good fingering weight cardigan, so I do knit a lot of stuff in fingering weight, but I love the bombshell worsted. That's actually what I knit my sweater that I'm wearing today out of. I call this my Swamp Witch sweater because Swamp Witch is the colorway of the yarn that I am using. It was a mistake that turned out really, really lovely in the dye pots, and it was so much fun that I thankfully had taken notes of all of my mistakes, and so after it turned out really lovely, it was looking like literal poop in the dye pans for a minute, and then I went mad with the speckles and speckled a whole bunch of purpley pinks and greens and browns over it, and it kind of turned into magic. And thankfully I remembered what I'd done enough to write it all down, and then after it dried and I was like, oh my god, this is fantastic, I dyed up several more batches of it and sold out of all of them fairly quickly because it really is pretty stunning. So yeah, I dyed myself an entire sweater quantity, and this is the Armand cardigan, which I have showed on the podcast before. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I'll put a link to it below, as well as to the Groot's cardigan. But I just love it for cardigans. It's very, very squishy and cozy. The yarn is very elastic, so it's really, really good for making like a fitted cardigan like this one is, because it really hugs to your body nicely, but it also stretches out and expands really well. So there's a lot of forgiveness and ease in the sizing, and it's just really cozy, especially for like really cold weather sweaters. Or I like it, like this one that I'm wearing and this one I knit. I really like these types of sweater cardigans for like going for walks in the woods when it's fall time, and you put on like your skinny jeans and your boots and a big cozy comfy cardigan and you just go walk through the crispy leaves. That's like my favorite thing. So I'm really excited to have that done. I'm bummed that I didn't get it blocked yet. I actually thought about not blocking it because it has ribbing on all sides, and so it kind of does lay pretty flat, but some of the cable panels are a little bit squishy and the collar doesn't lay very well, so I think I'm going to just very lightly block it. And I think I'm going to try to do that today because I had some appointments later this afternoon that got canceled last minute. And so I suddenly just had like an hour or two open up in my day in the middle of the afternoon. And I'm thinking that I might spend that time blocking my cardigan so I can finally get that done. And then the other thing I'm struggling with is I don't even know what I'm going to do for the buttons. It does have buttonholes and buttons, but it's the kind of cardigan coat where I usually like to have the buttons on my sweater in case I want to button it closed. Sometimes I really do like to do that. And because this one is more of like a cardigan coat, like a jacket style, instead of like just a little cardigan you'd wear indoors, I feel like I would want to have the buttons so that if I'm walking outside and it's a little windy and chilly, I could button it up. But I'm also really bad about taking the time to do the finishing on my sweaters. I like to do the knitting part. I really hate sewing in and like weaving in the ends or sewing up seams. I hate sewing on buttons. I know it doesn't make any sense because it looks so great once you get the buttons on. Like these buttons look phenomenal with this sweater, but I had a major bad attitude about sewing these on, and it took me forever to just get up the gumption to sit down and do it. And I met another gal locally here at a knitting group here in Kansas City the other day who was bragging about the fact that she has I think she said she'd only like once or twice ever sewn on buttons onto a sweater. Most of her sweaters, she knits the buttonholes in and she plans to sew the buttons on, but she just never does it. And she just wears them anyways as an open front cardigan or puts like a shawl pin through it. And she was quite happy with it that way. So I'm thinking about just going ahead and starting to wear this even if I don't have the buttons on yet. And maybe I can find some buttons later and get inspired. Every now and then I have a day where I get in the urge to just go through and do a bunch of finishing so that I can clean out my unfinished objects that are like almost done but just need finishing done. So if I get in one of those moods, I'll sit down and I'll sew buttons onto like 5 sweaters at once. And I just need to wait until that time comes up again and then just take advantage of it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, the next thing that I am working on is, that's the only thing that I've finished, but, and again, I guess it's not totally finished because I haven't blocked it. But I am working on the Shisui cardigan shrug thing. I don't know what you call it exactly. It's like a combination of a shawl and a cardigan. So it's this really big 2-color brioche and garter stitch combination. It starts like a shawl and you knit it down like a shawl, and then eventually you increase for sleeves, and then you're going to have the bottom. It's like a cuffed poncho or shawl, except it's not connected in the front like a poncho. It's like an open front cardigan. So I did show this on the podcast several weeks, maybe a month ago, when I was caking up yarn for it. And so I am making progress on that. It is slowly but surely coming along. So here is my progress so far. This main color that I'm using is called Sari, and it is from Vocabulary Yarns. So this is my outside main color that I'm using. It's mostly golds, but it has a little bit of aqua and green and flashes of pink and some white. It's really stunning. And then it is mixing so well. It's very high contrast, but is mixing really well with one of my hand-dyed yarns that's on the back side. This blue and teal and white color is one of my yarn clubs from 2018, so it's from last year. It is not available in the shop currently. It may be coming to the shop in the future, but it is not currently because club colors are exclusive colors, which means that in the month that they are the featured yarn, you have the first 2 weeks of the month to place your order, and then on the 15th of the month, they're taken down out of the shop and you can no longer order it anymore. And then I spend the last 2 weeks of the month dyeing it up and prepping everyone's order and shipping it out. And then on the 1st of the month, we launch a new colorway. So once the yarn goes down from the shop on the 15th, it's no longer available. You can't buy it. You can only buy it during the 2 weeks of the pre-order. That means it's not going to be back in the shop until at least a year in the future. If you see something that you like in the yarn clubs, you want to snag them because it won't be coming back. But this one was from last fall in 2018, and it's called Aquarius. I think I actually called it like Doorway to Aquarius or something like that. But I just think of it as Aquarius. And it's a really fabulous yarn. I really am enjoying it. It was on a superwash Polworth sock yarn base, so it's just 100% superwash Polworth wool, which we have talked about on the podcast before. And I had never knit with Polworth before, so I'm having a really fun time getting to try that out. That base is no longer available in the shop either because last year for clubs we did unusual bases that don't normally show up in the shop. They were just like specialty limited edition yarns, and so most of the Magical Portals yarn from last year is not going to be ever back in the shop, or maybe only in small quantities here and there. and the colorways are exclusive as well, so it'll be at least a year before this one comes back into the shop, and it may never come back. I don't know yet. But I really love how it's knitting up. It really looks fabulous with the vocabulary yarns. I just have one extra skein from last year's club that I miscounted when I was dyeing, and so I dyed up an extra skein and then realized I had an extra, and so I just kept it for me, and I'm really having fun with it. Now, I do only have one skein of the Aquarius yarn that I was just talking about, and this pattern calls for 2 skeins of both the main color and the contrast color. So I do have 2 skeins of the main color. I do not have 2 skeins of the contrast color. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be fading in a 3rd color on the back side. So it starts as Aquarius, these blues and teals and white, and then as I get close to the end of that skein, I'm going to be fading in this really pretty brown, which I've also showed on the podcast before, from Barnyard Knits, called Bear Hugs. It was just a single skein that I had in my stash and I thought was really pretty, and it looks phenomenal with both the Aquarius and the Sari yarn. So yeah, I'm going to work on that. This pattern is on Ravelry. Again, I'll put a link to that below. It is really, really fun as far as just being like a really loose, cozy. It looks to me like the kind of thing that you put on when you're just lazing around the house on a Sunday afternoon in your PJ pants and your big fuzzy socks, and you're just taking a day off to like knit or read a book or work on some art projects or just like hang out and watch movies with friends or something. And you're just like cozy and snuggly, but you're not super fancy. Like you just put your hair in a ponytail and throw this cardigan on over your t-shirt and just relax. So I'm really looking forward to having just a big cozy like house coat type of shawl cardigan combo. And I love the 2-color brioche, and it's broken up with sections of garter stitch, which makes it really fun. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, I'm a huge fan of garter stitch for indie dyed yarns because I love how it shows off the yarn colorway, but it's really soothing and simple and easy. I use it for TV knitting, and I also am one of those people who likes to read and knit at the same time if I have a book that'll either stay open or if I have an e-reader. So I really enjoy having garter stitch projects or stockinette stitch projects going on all the time so that I can have something to read and knit and do both of my hobbies at the same time. So the other project that I have been working on is my What the Fade shawl. I mentioned this on the podcast several weeks ago, maybe a month ago as well. I don't remember if I'd started it yet or not. I know I did an IGTV video, which was also on my Facebook page, showing off the very beginning of this pattern when I had first cast it on, but I don't think I've showed it very much, and I am actually almost done with this. This one I worked on like a madwoman about a month ago, right before my Atomic Age collection launched. I had cast it on, and I only had gotten a little bit into the top of it when the Atomic Age collection came out, but I was working on it pretty furiously because I wanted people to see how the colors were knitting up, and I'm just loving it. Now it is on a circular needle that I still have live stitches on, and it's not long enough to stretch it all out, so it's all bunched up at the bottom and you can't really see it totally, but hopefully you'll get the feel for it. So you start with 2-color brioche at the top in the What the Fade, and then you fade from all these different colors going down, and of course it's 2-color brioche, so it's reversible. And then at the bottom you start doing, after all the colors have been brioche faded, you start doing these garter stitch fades, which are just really stunning. And these colors, I'm using 5 of the colors from my Atomic Age collection and 1 additional color that came out at the same time but wasn't part of the official collection. However, it did go beautifully with these colors, so I decided to use that for my color A. So my top color here, color A, is called Jet Setter. It's a lot of burgundies and wines, and then it's got some little orangey gold and like aqua speckles and kind of some brown and pink speckles. It's really beautiful. And on the back side of that, I have Lawn Flamingo, which is a corally peach color with some speckles from the Atomic Age collection. And then on the front side, Jet Setter fades into Tiki Bar, which is right here. I am obsessed with these beautiful colors. I'm using mine on the gold Stellina base, which I absolutely love. It gives that fun little bit of sparkle, and it goes with, it's using colors like, it uses a deep burgundy, and then it's got a really bright, punchy aqua, greenish blue, some bright pinks. It's just really, really stunning. Some golds. And then Tiki Bar fades into Backyard Luau down here. Backyard Luau is a little bit brighter and a little more fun. It's very beachy feeling. And then, so on the back side, we have Lawn Flamingo that fades into Beatnik, which is this big section of gold with some speckles. And then Beatnik fades into Squaresville down here, which is kind of that soft minty background with the like bright speckles all over it. So it takes 6 colors if you knit it to the pattern, but the great thing about all of the fade patterns that Andrea Mowry has done, and many of the fades that other people are doing as well, is that you don't need to use the same amount of colors that she does. You can use fewer colors and just do bigger sections and fade less often, or you can use more colors and do smaller sections and fade more frequently. I actually thought about putting up to 10 colors in my What the Fade. I had 10 colors picked out that looked phenomenal together, but then I decided I really, really liked the sectioning of her original sample and the way that they blended and faded, and I just thought I was going to stick to the Atomic Age collection colors with the addition of the Jet Setter because I just loved how that looked with it. So I ended up taking several of my colors off. So I'm just using the recommended 6 colors, but you can use as many or as few as you would like. This is a really easy pattern if you already know how to do 2-color brioche. It's just very, very simple brioche with a few increases every so often, and then garter stitch, which everyone can do if you know how to knit, right? So it's pretty simple and easy, which makes it a really good relaxing like TV knitting, or I've taken mine in the car for traveling a lot. I did it a lot. I tend to get really bad headaches and migraines every so often, and sometimes a lot of times when I have a really bad migraine, I can't knit at all, but sometimes I can, especially if it's early on in the evening. Sometimes it even helps me because if I have something else to focus on, I'm not focusing so much on all of the pain that's making me feel nauseated and sick. So sometimes I will pick up my knitting, but I can't knit anything complicated when I have a migraine. I have to do just like garter stitch or stockinette in the round, and like a shawl or a pair of socks where like I can't be turning the heel of a sock, but if I'm just knitting the leg or knitting the foot for forever, I can do something really easy like that. So that's another reason I like to have simple, easy garter stitch and stockinette projects with not a lot of shaping or really easy shaping on hand, so that I can be working on that even when I have a migraine or when I'm just feeling really exhausted and my brain is like, I can't handle lace today, I can't handle charts, I can't handle anything hard. So that's been a really comforting project. I think this is going to be a huge shawl, which I love big, huge, cozy brioche shawls. So I'm very excited about that. And I did go up a needle size. The pattern actually calls for a size 3, but I didn't think that I was going to like that as much, and I didn't have any size 3 needles handy when I had the urge to cast on. It was one of those things where I got everything caked up and was like, this needs to happen like right this single second. So I just need to grab whatever's the closest needle and get to work, you know, like you do. So I just had a size 4 and a size 6 needle handy, and the 6 was like way too big, and the 4 I was like, well, that's only going up 1 needle size, and it's a shawl, it doesn't have to fit, so I don't need to worry about getting gauge. And I knew from experience, I've done a lot of brioche shawls on size 4, and so I knew I liked the way the fabric knit up, so I just cast that on, and I'm totally happy with it. But it might be slightly larger than the sample because I used a 4 instead of a 3, I don't know, but I don't think it's enough that it's really noticeable. But I'm very excited to get that finished. I'm still on the fence about whether or not I want to add the tassels. I will probably put the tassels on because I love how they look in the sample, but I've also seen several people's samples on Ravelry that they've knit up where they left the tassels off and just had really gorgeous contrasting colored fades. And I was like, that looks really good without the tassels too. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm kind of waiting to see how much yarn I have left over when I get done and just what kind of mood I'm in when I'm done. It's one of those things where I'll just have to see what I feel like when I get it finished, because if I try to make too many decisions ahead of time, I'm likely to just either regret them or end up changing my mind anyways. So that's kind of how I am with my knitting. I'm not usually that way with my life. Actually, in my personal life, I tend to be a bit more of a planner, and I'm willing to change my plan, but I always have to have a plan that I'm shooting for. And then if we have to change it, okay, sometimes I get really upset when the plan changes, but other times I'm like, that's fine, but I need to have something that I'm going for. So if we're changing the plan, that's okay, as long as we change from plan A to plan B, but we can't just be like, plan A isn't working out, but we have no alternatives, right? Because I just have to have something to shoot for. With my knitting, I'm like kind of the opposite. I think it's my de-stressor from being so planner in my life, because with my knitting, I very seldom have a plan. I don't really care about being perfectionistic. I don't like to follow rules, which is not how I am normally in my life. And I don't like to envision the outcome, because if I envision the outcome and it doesn't turn out as good as I want, then I'm disappointed. If I envision the outcome and it turns out better than I want, then, I mean, that's a good thing, but that often does, well, I wouldn't say it often doesn't happen. A lot of times it turns out even better than I envisioned. But I don't like to be married to my vision, if that makes sense, because I usually will change my mind 17 times along the way, so we might as well not even worry too terribly much about what it's going to look like. I guess in that sense, I am more of a process knitter than a product knitter, because I really enjoy the process of knitting and making decisions and changing my mind as I go, as opposed to trying to be married to an outcome. Which is why a few years ago, before I started Pushing Yarns, I tried my hand at knitting for hire, where people would like send me pictures of things they wanted or send me a link to a pattern on Ravelry or Pinterest or something and be like, hey, can you knit this for me? I'll pay you. And there were a lot of reasons I hated doing that. So kudos to you guys that do it, because I've tried it and I stink at it. But one of the reasons was I could never stick to the plan. If they sent me a picture and they were like married to that picture, it was like too much pressure that was put on me, and even if I'm a really good knitter and I know I can normally do that pattern, somehow I would manage to completely screw it up, and it wouldn't turn out the way it was supposed to, and they wouldn't be happy, I wouldn't be happy, and then I'd be angry because usually I hadn't charged enough anyways to cover my time, so I already felt like I was like slave labor working for nothing, and then I would have to either give them a discount or not charge them and be stuck with this gross thing I didn't like, and yeah. It was a nightmare. So I'm much happier dyeing yarn and being on that end and just knitting for fun. I quickly realized that knitting for a business is not something I'm willing to do. So knitting for fun is definitely more my style. If someone's paying me to knit, I can't do it. So when people ask me now, I just say, nope, I don't do that anymore. Sorry. If you want to knit that, learn to knit yourself. So anyways, that's what I've been working on lately. I hope that you guys are feeling more inspired than I am, because I've really hit a dry patch where I just am like, I don't want to get on Ravelry and even look at stuff. I was looking through Pinterest the other day and I was just like, meh. And I quit looking at knitting stuff and got really distracted just looking at like bathroom remodels and things like that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope that you are having a lot of fun getting a lot of cozy knitting in while it's still winter. At least if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's still winter. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you're gearing up for winter probably and starting to pull out your cozy knitting and crochet. So I hope you guys are getting a lot done, and I hope that the weather is starting to warm up where you are, because where I am it's still very cold and I'm kind of getting over it. I'm actually kind of a cold weather fan. I usually really enjoy winter and I'm not in a hurry for it to get to spring, but this year I'm in a hurry for it. I think I'm over it, and March is just around the corner. By the time this comes out this weekend, it'll just be starting March, and I'm ready. I'm so ready. So I really hope that spring is going to be here within the next week or two. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, but it is now time to cast off. Love you.